Okay, so here we are in chapter 7, back to looping. There is one exercise that's called graphic loop. We're not going to do some of the other loops, there's not enough time. But we will do this one graphic loop that we're going to open up a new Pygame screen, and we're going to fill it, or try to fill it, with blocks that go all the way across and from the very leftmost part to the very right of the screen, and run from the top to the bottom, all with one command inside of a loop. So to get started, there is a template, some template code. If I click here, there's also an additional video by the author of the book that will explain some things, and then there's all this code that's already written for us. We're going to be borrowing most of it. I'm going to add another tab so that I can open up my REPL, and I can create a new file by clicking on the top right with the plus new REPL and choose Python. I'm going to call this blocks, B-L-O-C-K-S, and press enter to accept, and my file is created. So I have my editor open. I'm going to give myself more space here on the left to get more code visible. I'm going to go back to the link that I opened, that template. The first few lines, and by that I mean the first 11, are just some remarks. Those are just comments, notes for you to look at if you want. I'm going to highlight everything after that all the way to the bottom, right click and copy that code. Go back to my REPL that's already saved as blocks. Click inside of the leftmost square and right click and paste. I don't have that option, but I can press Ctrl V as in Victor, and I just pasted everything. Let's see what happens when I run it. This is just a template, so I don't really expect it to do much, but it does set up some things that we will need for this demonstration. And there it is. It just basically, it's giving me a white square with a white window. Well, and the white square is really just trying to represent what the screen might look like. All the screen, the box that we created is 700 by 500, I think. And it goes from left to right and top to bottom. It's actually even has a title that you can change. This one's called My Game. Here I'm gonna make this My Blocks, because that's what we're gonna be doing anyway, My Blocks. Let's see what else, what kind of code it's already got. First of all, it imports the Pygame, so it gets the library for graphics, and then it defines some basic colors. We're going to be using lots of red, green, and blue, the RGB model. Also black and white. Black is the absence of color, so the values would be 0 for red, green, and blue. For white, when you have all the colors, it's 255, 255, 255. That's white, combination of all colors. Green and red are the respective high values, so 0 red, 255 green, 0 blue, and the same thing for red, 255 red, 0 green, 0 blue. We're going to initialize the Pygame library, and this is where we actually set up the size. This window, like I said, is 700 by 500. 700 is the X value, that's the horizontal value, and 500 is the Y value, that's the vertical value. Then we have another variable that we're calling screen. That is a command that will help us draw on the screen. As mentioned earlier, the title of the box that opens, the window, is going to be called My Blocks. It used to be called My Game. And then we have a logic loop that just is going to keep the window open. And whatever little code we put in, it'll be in here. I see that line 41 has a remark that says drawing code should go here. So I'm going to click at the end of that line, press enter a couple of times, and this is where we will actually do some programming. So you'll see that it's already indented. It should be at the same position as the hashtag above it. And we're going to be using two for loops. Let me start with the first one. What is a for loop? It's just we have done while loops before, so while something is true, keep on doing the same thing. Here we're going to tell it to do certain things a certain number of times. So my first loop will say something like it's going to be for, and I'll use X since I'm going to draw all of those little squares from the very left to the right. I'm going to say do here at the very beginning where it's 0. Start to draw a little square that's 10 by 10 pixels, and then skip 10 pixels and draw another one just like it. Then skip 10 pixels and draw another one just like it, and so on and so forth until we go all the way across. Once this is done, we're going to say, now that you finished this line, the first thing that you did, the same thing, but start a little bit lower. And then do it again until you've almost reached the bottom. Does that make sense? We'll try our best. So we're going to do the first loop, the 4x, so it goes horizontally. We're going to say that it's in range of the very beginning, which is 0, and we want it to go all the way across to 700 or almost 700. Let's do 690, because each one of the squares will be 10 pixels. And then I'm going to put a comma and say not only do that, but do it every 20. So if the first number is 0, I want the second number not to be 1, but rather to be 20 or 19 in this case. So we're going to do in steps of 20. Once that is declared, I will type in the colon saying this is what I want you to do. I want you to go and get the Pygame library and draw. That's the command that we get from the library. Draw a rectangle, R-E-C-T. Then we're going to invoke the screen that we declared before. And we're going to use the color green. I'm going to use it in all caps because we declared it in all caps, or at least the template declared it in all caps. Comma, and then inside of this, now we're going to say, well, what are you doing? You're doing, you're going to start the X wherever it is right now. The first step will be 0. The first step should be 20. And then 30, or rather it's going to be, let me go back, 0, 20, 40, 50, etc. So it's going to be drawing multiple squares across. Well, I'm telling you all this, but it's going to be doing it just by saying an X. We're not going to see the values. We're going to see the results and comma and say, well, we wanted to do at the very top, the Y is going to be 0. So if you go across, you only go 1, you don't go any spaces ahead. We just go 0, so it's right at the edge. Unless it adds and adds and adds and adds as it keeps on going. And but from top though, we wanted to start the very top for now. So that's going to be 0, and then we said that we want a 10 by 10. It's going to be 10 to the right and then 10 below. That's how big the square is going to be. Clear as mud. Okay, well, what's going on? Let's stop what's going on and try to run it and see if it gives us anything to begin with. It's pulling in all the stuff, and what it did is that it did just that. It created one square at the very beginning, at the very top, and then it skipped 10 pixels and it drew another 10 by 10, and then it drew another 10 by 10, and so on and so forth until it almost reached the end. So that's one line. We wanted to do all the lines, right? And we declared this to be, was it 500 tall? So our screen, let me see how big it is. I want to say it's 500. And yes, it's 700 by 500 right there on our line 12. So since we drew the first line, we wanted to do the same thing again. Now we've already told it what we want it to do. We just need to tell it how much to repeat it. So we're going to create a nested loop right after the first declaration of the loop 4x. We're going to go all the way to the colon, press enter, and I'm going to start to create a second loop, and that's going to be the y loop. So I'll say for y in range, and it's going to be something similar. It's going to go from 0 because we wanted to start at the very beginning, comma, and then rather than going to 690, we wanted to go down to 500. So let's do 490 instead. 490, comma, we wanted to skip the same number of steps, so 20. And we now tell it what to do by adding the colon. In the second line, because this is a nested loop, the Pygame needs to also have an extra tab. So I'm going to go all the way to the edge to the Pygame and press tab just before that. That way it's pulled in and it now should be recognized as part of the loop. So because it's a nested loop, x will be growing and y will be growing. X will go from 0 to 690, y will go from 0 to 490, changing. So I also, before I forget, I need to tell it that we're taking into account x growing. We need to take it into account that y is growing as well. So it's going to start to draw the square at x and y and go all the way across and just take turns as it goes. Stop that and run and wait for that to load, and I have this that looks very much like what we were trying to do. This is a different kind of screen and a different system, but we're getting the same results basically. If you wanted to look a little bit more like the original one, we're filling the screen with white. We could fill this with black. We did define black at the top, and we could have defined any other colors, but we have black and white and green already defined. So let's run that and see what happens. And well, there you go. Here this looks a lot more like what we did here. I want to say that this was probably a much longer screen, a much taller screen, but the squares might have been even tinier. Or it's just all an illusion. It's just a dream. Make sure that you copy the code on, or rather the URL to your code, and turn that in for a grade for this assignment, and you can move on to the next one.